Welcome, everybody, to the Loud and Drunk podcast. This is Dan. We're going to be going over a lot of things in this episode. One of them, things that make us uncomfortable. I can tell you right off the bat, something that makes me uncomfortable. Introducing Moses to the podcast. You never know what he's going to say. Moses, how you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. I am living a dream.
Perfect. Another thing we're going to be talking about, it's been all over the news for the last couple of months. Free speech, where do you hit the limits, this, that, and the other thing. Justin, sir.
Oh, baby. I am just so excited to get into this minefield of a topic. I love it. Let's do it.
And George Lee here, a speech activist. Very excited to be here and just dive deep into this topic that I am very, very passionate about.
But before we get going, we talk about food a lot here. So let me tell you about one of the best places around. Head over to Stonefire Grill in Beechwood and enjoy the best wings in Ocean County, whether it's date night or just headed to the bar to watch the game. Stonefire's atmosphere and delicious menu will leave you impressed. I'd also like to take this time to encourage you to subscribe to this podcast. We are on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Rumble, and everywhere else you get your podcasts. If you are on YouTube and Rumble, smash that like button. Leave us a comment. Share this video with your friends and get in on the conversation by joining us on social media at Loud and Drunk on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. All right, guys, we're going to be tackling a pretty controversial issue. Don't know why it's so controversial. In my opinion, it's the foremost right of any, and I'm going to say this probably a lot in this episode, any classical liberal society. You have the ability to speak your mind, worship freely, defend yourself, this, that, and the other thing. The foremost right out of all of that is to speak freely. And recently, on college campuses, that has come under fire, whether it's people going there to speak, do a lecture or a presentation of some sort, and then having an event canceled. Or just recently, when 2 out of 3 presidents of, 3 particular institutions, Harvard, UPenn, and MIT, resigned. Now, some of that had to do with, it was tying into, Israel and Palestine and all that.
Right.
And for the Harvard president, it was also because she plagiarized most of her work. But that whole kerfuffle led into kind of a free speech debate, because a lot of that is dependent on, we'll dive a little bit into this at some point, what is protected speech and what is not protected speech.
And it's an eternal debate.
Yes.
It's like heated right now, but it's been going on for forever.
It's been going on in this country since pretty much the inception of this country.
Yeah, I should be allowed to say whatever I want to say, and you shouldn't be allowed to say things that I disagree with.
Yes.
That's what it comes down to for most people.
So, one thing I really want to, kick this podcast off with in terms of talking about free speech is we'll go around. I'll ask all you guys, would you consider yourself a free speech absolutist? And Justin, I'll let you answer this first.
I would like to say yes, but sometimes I think you need to get punched in the mouth if you say something stupid to somebody. So, as an absolutist, I'd love to say yes, but I think my brain will always try to find reasons to fuck with myself on that, unfortunately.
Moses.
Well, I must admit I'm taken a bit back, because when this was brought up, I thought you were saying free Screech, and I didn't know I didn't know Dustin Diamond was in any kind of litigation. He is dead. I looked it up, and that's what made it even more confusing. But I think you should be able to say whatever the fuck you want, because sure, there's going to be consequences like punches in the face, but that's your right too.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that to a degree. I think that in terms of, because I think we're talking about two different things, like your right, like your legal right to say whatever
we're talking about legal right for sure.
Yeah, as far as legal rights go, yeah, I think that if you allow a government to say what's okay to say and what isn't, then it's an enormously slippery slope. But at the same time, if you say certain things in certain company or wherever the case may be, and somebody, as it was said, punches you in the nose, likewise, I don't think that that's always wrong, nor should the government punish the person who's doing the punching, because there are things that you should be allowed to say, but you should also have to bear the consequences of that. I also think that you should be allowed to do a lot of things in this society, and maybe the government shouldn't be the one to punish you for it, but if the person that you're wronging wants to punish you, then that falls within their right.
A lot of the big questions for me come in, there's definitely separation between that and dealing with the government's oversight and intervention. In these
Exactly,
things.
yeah, because then you're kind of, when you talk about free speech, and it kind of alludes to what I was saying before, where it's that I think that everything that I'm saying is right and fair, but if I disagree with you, then what you're saying is inciting violence and wrong. So therefore I shut down what you're saying and I allow what I'm saying. So it's not really functional to allow any like, in this case, a government to decide who's right and who's wrong, because I intrinsically believe that whatever your beliefs are, they're not right or wrong, they're just your beliefs. I like to think that I've got good reasons for saying the things that I say, but I've been wrong a million times. Probably going to be wrong many times tonight because I'm drinking some red wine here, so I'm a little bit out of my element.
Ooh, so you're getting philosophical,
Oh,
too.
my God. We're going to break this down to the Greeks, baby.
Oh, go Achilles.
All right. So one of the things that I mentioned just a bit ago was that 2 out of the 3 presidents that testified in a hearing about, anti-Semitism and all that. So I figured what we can do, play that interaction. It's about 3.5 minutes long.
Yeah, excellent.
And we can react to that. And then we can also talk about whether their answers were stupid, on point, this, that, and the other thing. All right. So let's fire that up.
Dr. Kornbluth, at MIT, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate MIT's code of conduct or rules regarding bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
If targeted at individuals, not making public statements.
I don't.
Yes or no?
Yeah.
Calling for the genocide of Jews does
not really a yes
constitute
or no
bullying and
question.
harassment?
I have not heard calling for the genocide for Jews on our campus.
But you've heard chants for intifada.
I've heard chants, which can be anti-Semitic depending on the context, when calling for the elimination of the Jewish people.
I have questions now.
So those would not be according to the MIT's code of conduct or rules.
That would be investigated as harassment.
I would love to
or
work in the
freezing
Congress where you can
severe.
just ask people
Ms.
super
McGill,
loaded questions and be a
at Penn,
giant
does
douchebag
calling
to
for the
them.
genocide of
can't do anything.
Jews violate Penn's
Why does she have a
rules
bib
or
on?
code
Do
of
they have ribs?
conduct? Yes or no?
It's lobster. They have lobster.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah, it's the Congress. They're not eating ribs.
That's what the
They're not going to get their hands dirty. They have people for that.
So that's what the hammer's for.
I
Got
am
it.
asking specifically calling for the genocide of Jews. Does that constitute bullying or harassment?
The one guy in the background is falling asleep. You see that?
Oh, he absolutely. Oh, no, he opened his eyes for a brief second.
Well, it's
So the
actually a
answer is
pretty
yes.
point-blank question, though. Does that constitute bullying and harassment?
I don't know. Does it?
Context-dependent decision.
And it's
That's your
also it's not
testimony
according
today,
to
calling for the
government rules. Now it's
genocide of
government
Jews
asking
is
these
dependent
questions,
upon the
but also at the same time they're
context.
asking,
That is not
does that
bullying or
violate
harassment.
the institution's
This is
policy?
the easiest question to answer. Yes, Ms.
Does it
McGill.
violate the policy of the institution?
So is your testimony that you will not answer yes?
And the policy presumably says that you can't
If the
Yes or no?
you can't
The
call
speech
for
becomes
violence
conduct,
against, X,
it
Y,
can be
Z.
harassment.
I kind of
Conduct
agree with the
meaning
person who's
committing
being
the act of
questioned, where it
genocide?
is still like in this
The speech
area
is not harassment. This
You
is
need an
unacceptable, Ms.
investigation
McGill.
to
I'm gonna
figure
give you
out what
one
the
more
context and what the...
opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, if you're
Well,
saying
to
let's
see
go
your
and
answer.
kill all the Jews,
Does
then
calling
yes,
for
it's
the
obviously a
genocide of
call to
Jews
violence,
violate Penn's
The other
code of
terms that she
conduct
was
when it
using, though,
comes to bullying and
intifada
harassment?
means
Yes
uprising.
or no?
Yeah.
So I would say in that case, I mean, if you want to be literal, then no, it's not a call to violence.
The
Though
answer is
intifadas
yes.
were usually
And
calls to
Dr.
violence.
Gay,
Yeah.
at Harvard. does
Now,
calling
it's
for the
different because
genocide
when
of
we talk
Jews
about free
violate
speech,
Harvard's
free
rules of
speech
bullying
is,
and harassment?
as
Yes
you know,
or
in the
no?
First Amendment, is something that the government can't take away from you.
Right, yeah.
But, when
But
you
an institution
But an institution can, and then we can also get into that too, because as we
It's
move on with this
targeted at Jewish
conversation,
students,
there's a lot of
Jewish
people out there that
individuals.
want to,
Do
say that
understand
like,
your
well,
testimony is dehumanizing them?
you don't get
Do you
free speech
understand
from
that
corporations or this, that, and the
dehumanization
other
is
thing.
part of
Corporations don't grant you
anti-Semitism?
free speech.
I
So
will ask
if
you
you're saying
one
like a
more
college
time.
doesn't grant you free
Does
speech or
calling for
a
the
corporation
genocide of
can't
Jews
grant you free speech,
violate
then you're saying there's a
Harvard's rules of
loophole
bullying
in the
and
First
harassment?
Amendment.
Yeah.
Yes or no?
Well, yeah, should you be obligated to? I mean, that goes back to the size of
anti-Semitic
institutions as
rhetoric-
well. Because it's like, if you come into my house and want to say something that I don't agree with, then I can, beat the shit out of you. I can kick you out. I can kill you. I can do
It
all
is
of
kind of a
these
matter
things.
of scale like that.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're Harvard,
the
a
answer is
name which
yes,
is like synonymous
calling for
with
the
this
genocide of
country's
Jews
educational system, I mean,
violates
they're on
Harvard
the
Code of
scale of
Conduct,
government,
correct.
state governments at least. Then yeah, I mean, presumably you've got some more obligations
It
out of
does not
that.
depend on
But
the
I mean, to what
context. The
degree? It's kind of
answer
up to the
is yes,
beholder.
and this is
Now, we were
why
talking
should
over, but
resign.
it's also
These are
kind of like when you say it
unacceptable
depends on the
across board.
context, and like the loaded question aside, but if you're saying that within the context it's okay to say that you do call for the genocide of Jews,
Yeah.
that's
Well, see-
that's still fucked up.
See, well, this is, fucked up or not. I mean, my take on that would be that if you want to, and this is, I guess this would, not to jump the gun too much, but I think that if you think that all Jews should be killed and that there should be no more Jews on the planet because we killed all of them, then you should be allowed to say that. Why should you be stopped from saying that? That's just a belief system. Whether you're right or wrong is irrelevant, and hopefully you don't have enough followers to carry that out. But I think that it's stupid to say that somebody shouldn't be allowed to espouse their beliefs, because all that you're doing is pushing that thought underground and militarizing people. People should be allowed to say what they want to say. Now, if you're the head of an institution that's being funded by the government, maybe then there should be more rules attached. I don't agree with, I don't disagree with that concept. But in terms of just saying that people shouldn't be allowed to call for the destruction of a person, especially on that grand scale. Now, I would change that answer a little bit if it was like a guy who was like out on a street corner being like, let's go and kill John Smith up the road, where it's incredibly targeted towards one person and the reality of it becomes much more acute. Then I would say, there should be more rules involved in that, because it could happen so much more easily. But in terms of just being like, I think that people should be allowed to say, I hate fucking Jews, whites, blacks, what the fuck ever, and they shouldn't exist.
Well, there's also,
and if I had my way, they would be dead.
There's also a difference between saying you hate somebody and also calling for, the extermination.
I think that people should be allowed to call for the destruction of people.
Now, that is actually covered because in the case that I pulled up here of Brandenburg v. Ohio. Now, I don't want to get too dry here because this is not an educational podcast, but just real quick.
Strap in.
That case created the test for free speech in this particular case of whether the speech creates an imminent lawless action and is likely to incite or produce such an action. So if you're saying that on a college campus, if they're screaming like "gas the Jews," that's still covered. That's still covered by the Brandenburg v. Ohio case because it doesn't call for let's gas the Jews that are right here, now.
Right. Yeah.
But isn't that specifically for the government punishing you, where the institution, say Harvard, can punish you if it goes against their...
Harvard can punish you for that. Yeah,
they've got their own policy.
Yeah,
because they have their own
but
policies.
the government can't for you saying things of that nature.
They can't throw you in jail for that, essentially.
Yeah. Right. And I think that's because that's another thing that we have in this country, where it's that you've got your own personal property.
Yeah.
So that goes back to what I was saying. Like in my home, I don't necessarily want people saying these things, and I would, do what I could to not allow that to happen. But in a public place or wherever, and likewise Harvard, they're funded by the government. They're a giant institution, so I don't want to compare any one of our homes to Harvard. But to apply the same type of reasoning is that if that was completely private, if it wasn't, on the scale that it was, getting the millions and millions of dollars of funding that they get from taxpayers, then I would say, they should be allowed to make whatever rules that they want. They could be more constrictive than what we already have. They could say you're not allowed to say any of these things. You're not allowed to say fucking, Debbie cakes on Tuesdays for all I fucking care. Or likewise, you could say anything that you fucking want. You could yell fire in a busy auditorium on the campus. I feel like that's their private property. They can allow that.
To go to what you were saying, if you don't care if they yell fire, but that could be punished under government because that's inciting, you're creating a disturbance and inciting a riot.
Yeah.
Because people are going to go crazy if you yell fire in let's say a movie theater.
And that was the original example that I was pulling that from. But yes, I would say that I was allowing that specifically. If I owned a private piece of property that, let's say, was 500 acres and I built a bunch of bullshit on it and we were all hanging out, and I said everybody can do whatever they want here, then as far as I'm concerned, if somebody yells fire and all of my guests die, then that's not really the government's business insofar as, other than that, the person who yelled it, essentially, you could maybe charge them. My bottom line about it is that you should be allowed to set those rules within your own framework. But what the government does in terms of free speech, that is much more cut and dry in the sense that it shouldn't be limited in what you're able to get away with as long as you're not immediately calling for direct harm upon somebody.
Well, that's what that
and
case
even
is
that's a
calling.
great. Well, they were extrapolating upon it by saying that allowing these things to occur. But as far as I'm understanding with this particular case that we just watched, and correct me if I'm wrong because I have not followed it, but there was no particular person who was called out in that. Like they didn't say, let's go and kill fucking, Isaac over
that
there.
That was one of the things they were saying. Like, if it's aimed at a particular individual, then that's considered harassment. That's not like if you have a group of
It's harassment.
kids.
Yeah.
It would still be harassment if you're saying, like, let's get them. That's a little bit of a mistake.
Yeah, I think that harassment should be, a crime to some degree. You shouldn't be going to like fucking, you shouldn't be doing that to some individual person or some small group of people.
But they're
in
also
general,
right to go in, like, it would be on a context and a kind of case-by-case basis, because maybe, like, it's a Harvard College, maybe somebody's out there practicing their oral speech or for some play that's going on. Like they're doing a musical of like Schindler's List and somebody's got to play Hitler. So they're just practicing their lines. Like,
that's illegal now.
Well, I mean, that's why it would be on a case-by-case basis that, maybe this person doesn't believe any of this. They're just yelling it because they're practicing their report or practicing for a play of some sort,
This is where you get into the weeds on this stuff. Yes, perfectly sure. You could do it case by case, but it's never that clear a lot of times. It always comes down to interpretation.
Yeah.
And you end up going in for these tit-to-tat type things. Like in a lot of this stuff, when you get into the provisionals of the First Amendment and stuff like that, it's really kind of complicated.
Yeah. I mean, I would give this example, and I'll turn this back on myself for this purpose. But like, I'll use the example: you shouldn't be threatening somebody who lives right up the road, right? That's not right. That's presumably where the government.
Well, threats are different.
Yeah. Well, no, that's what I mean, though. Right? Free speech. Yeah. So I am a believer that you should be allowed to go and get up on your little podium in the whatever this neighborhood and say, we need to go and kill all the Jews. Fuck them. And I would like to think that somebody's going to come up at some point and punch you in the face, and you won't do that in this particular neighborhood again. You'll try your hand at another one. Yeah, this one's
this one would probably fly,
but like that would be fine, and that would fall within my framework of what's acceptable. Like the police should not roll up, the government should not roll up and say, hey, you're not allowed to talk shit about the Jews. It's anti-Semitic, right? I think that what that person is doing is very acceptable. At the same time, and as far as the weeds go and that gray area, you could likewise get up at that podium and be like, we need to kill all the Jews. And there are some Jews living right on this block. Some of them only 500 feet away from where I'm standing, just a little bit to the north of here. Some of them even have red doors, and they drive Nissan Rogues, and they're nearly right over there. And you basically paint a picture. So
you do that, and that's what they're talking about in that case.
Yeah. And now you're in a gray area where you haven't said it, but you've clearly said it. So it requires a human to diagnose what you were doing, and that's the shady part, because now you've got a judge, and I don't trust judges. Because I'm Jewish.
But the part of this discussion, as we go back to the college campus aspect of that, is that in that scenario, if you're saying, all right, let's gas the Jews, if you go ahead and misgender somebody, they're going to come down on you.
Yeah. Well, they come down on you for everything now.
They're going to come down on you for that, but is that an equal offense? If you're going to say gas the Jews versus you're a he, because it's a threat as opposed to being like, oh, I'm slightly insulted. Like everybody gets insulted.
Anybody, and likewise, though, you could say that you're slightly insulted. And I do agree with the essence of what you're saying. But at the same time, it's that anybody can be offended by fucking anything.
Yes.
Because it's like, I'm not offended by somebody being like an anti-Semite or something like that. That's your problem. You know, I don't really give a shit about that. But God knows there's a million Jews who are quick to, jump up on the bandwagon and be like, you're an anti-Semite and we need to remove all of society from you, or vice versa.
And that's where we go into college campuses, because most of the lack of free speech that comes on college campuses is due to people taking offense. Now, we played.
I thought you were going to say the Jews. I was going to agree with you.
No, we got to really calm down now with the threats to Jewish people. I'm sure.
I think we've reached the top of our ticker on that one for this episode.
Well, I'm not done.
No, this isn't going to air now.
No, let's just have to.
I didn't know that.
Dan, I will not be censored. That is very anti-Semitic of you, and I will tell my mother.
It goes against this free speech.
But on college campuses, as I mentioned before, you misgender somebody, you're pretty much a piece of shit. Mm-hmm. And also, when you have certain speakers come onto college campuses, they have been effectively. There was an episode of South Park back in the day that the theme was terrorism works, and if you threaten somebody enough, then they're just like, all right, we'll back down and that speaker can't come here. And that also will go into free speech as well, because, all right, I paid for the time to go to this college campus and speak my mind. Now, people who have just threatened to cause harm to the people that go or to the speaker, whatever, that gets those people removed and their event removed from speaking on the college campus.
Yeah, I distinctly remember a couple of years ago that was happening a lot. What was it? That guy that was on... He was on JRE. I can't remember.
Oh, there's a bunch of them.
Yeah. But I remember like Dr. Deborah So. I think there was issues with her. I try to put myself into this mentality because like I went to like a technical school barely for like a year, so I didn't really run into any of that stuff. But like it's very evident. It's incredibly apparent through the whole higher education system, and I'm sure even lower and in other industries and areas out there, especially in the online age. You get these very loud like minorities of people that can use that vitriol or their anger or whatever you want to put it, their voice to like interfere in pretty much anything.
I feel like, just to break it down, I feel like it's the unspoken thing about it. It's that we live in an age where, and maybe it's existed before, but right now we live in an age where people are fucking offended by everything and they feel like they shouldn't have to be.
Right.
They feel like their being offended is forced upon them, like someone else is offending them, as opposed to themselves choosing to be offended, which is how I interpret that. And I think that that is something that I've observed over my, handful of decades here.
Yeah.
That people are just, they feel like they should never have to confront an idea that's different from their own, which, getting back to like should you be allowed to call for the genocide of a whole group of people? Yeah, I don't agree with it. But like, how else am I going to understand anything about anybody else? If you genuinely feel that way, then I would like to hear what you have to say. I'll probably never agree with you. You'll probably never agree with me. But I would like to learn from what you have to say. And that's what it is. It's that people have this quickness to shut other people out instead of hearing them.
Like, I don't believe one generation is better than the next or whatever. We're all here for the ride.
100%.
But I think that with the much more easy access to being able to put your voice out into the world and it being heard or interacted with by people who that would never ever happen without the internet. And I guess it allows you to build these networks of kind of like these echo chamber type groups where you just reinforce each other in your beliefs. And I don't think it's different that people are more offended or not. I think they're just louder.
They're louder.
Yeah.
What I would add to it, though, is also, and chiming in or tying on to your the concept of basically how quick it is and how easy it is now. It's also, to me, it's like it's this macro scale of what's happening in the country and presumably all around the world, where you have tribalism now as the government is unable to deliver on its promises. I guess we could word it that way. Then you find people looking for groups to belong to where they do fit in, and they find these groups on the whole thing goes together, in other words.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. Yeah, it's wild. So it's like, I remember, like, there's that Dunbar's number or whatever. Maybe not Dunbar's number, but like the 150 people, like the amount of people that you could,
250,
something like whatever the number is. But it's like X amount of people, and now when you can actively interact with millions of people.
The concept there being, correct me if I'm wrong, but just for those not familiar, the concept behind it is that there's an optimal size of society that we kind of evolved for, and it's typically within the range of like 100 to 500 people.
Something like that.
And it's basically, the idea behind it is that if you live in a society, a group of people that's that big, not to say that you can't interact with other groups, but that your particular community, if it's that size, then it means that you kind of know everybody to some degree or another. Whereas obviously when you reach a scale that we're at now, well outside of those thresholds, and you live in the United States or pretty much any country in the world, you've got, what is it, fucking 300 million people here? Where are we at?
Oh, United States?
Yeah, 330.
Something like that.
Something in that note. So it means that intrinsically, obviously, most of us, of Americans, have met, still 500 people.
Right.
So you don't know the people who represent you, so on and so forth. And so we've escaped from that. And now you have this desire to create an identity outside of this larger framework where we're all Americans, but the 300x the 300x million that we've got, we don't actually share a real relationship with.
Right.
And that's the fundamental problem.
Well, it's also easier to find those people that share your niche
Beliefs.
interests
and
beliefs, because when you're person to person, you don't typically be like, Christian, huh?
Well,
what do you think about
You
hating
don't?
Jews? I'm like, But if you go to a specific chat room or site, you're going to find somebody that's on your level.
Chat room, you're dating yourself.
I thought that was just for pedophiles.
Well, no, you go on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whatever was popular at the time that you were
could
using
go to
the
a
internet.
subreddit that's like, I hate Jews, and I'm sure you'd be able to find it.
Live journal?
Is that what it is? No, I don't know. But you'll be able to find those people that you would be uncomfortable asking anyone in person about, but you already know these people are there, so it makes it that much easier to really get into whatever perverted deviation.
When you don't have to put your face to it, it's a lot easier to interact with people.
And that's actually one of the things that Nikki Haley, she's running for president, unfortunately, wants to
Aren't
do.
they all?
Yeah. And she said that, day one, she wanted anybody that is anonymous online to have to register their name.
Yeah. There's nothing more Republican than that.
Yeah, there's nothing more free speech about having to register with the government.
I've read this in the comics before, and
like,
it doesn't
listen,
work
in my
out.
intrusive thoughts, I've had like not to that like register with the government, but as part of the issue of like you can just send anything out into the void without consequence.
Dan, I have a
So,
question. If she gets elected president, can I get a free barcode out of it?
No, it will not be.
Because
free.
honestly,
No,
I'm
you
a
will
few
get-
generations detached
You
now.
will get a free barcode. It'll be tattooed on the back of your neck.
and she will not be
all right,
president.
I'll take that. Yeah.
No,
Definitely
no.
not be president.
No.
Even Republicans don't like her. The only Republicans that like her are Republicans that don't like Trump.
What does she look like?
It's like 50%.
Let me see that little.
I can.
That's how I judge a president. She looks like a Karen.
That's
God.
That's pretty much. We are looking at Nikki Haley right
Yes.
now. We pulled it up on the big screen, and she's awesome.
I mean, she's the best looking of the Republicans that. Well, no, I'll take that back. She's the best looking of the people who are running for president right now.
But
that's not
What's the
saying a lot.
ethnicity
I don't
that
even
she
know.
says she is?
oh, she's. I think she says that she's fucking Indian.
Why is
sometime.
everybody's doing that now? Everybody's got to be a Native American.
No,
No.
Indian, like from India.
Oh, wow.
Wow,
I
all
don't
right.
see that at all.
Well, yeah. I hate to judge a book by
yeah.
its cover,
Let
but
me
where's her
punch
red
this.
dot?
Yeah. Let me punch this up real quick.
They really threw a lot of whitewash on that one.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Actually, while we're talking about this,
Mm-hmm.
brings me to this point. Because when these kids were getting in trouble for, calling for harm to Jewish people, and, Ron DeSantis from Florida and a bunch of other governors were revoking, like, visas for the kids that were going to these schools.
Right, yeah.
To, like, or part of the clubs. One Republican candidate, Vivek Ramaswamy, was like, no, you shouldn't
yeah.
be doing that.
Yeah.
Because in order
He's like
to
Trump's right-hand man.
He's like, he's pretty much running to be Trump's vice president.
Yeah.
But on that, he's absolutely correct.
Oh, I
because
agree with that.
Because also,
I agree.
if you're
What is she
going
wearing?
to, yes, all right.
That
So,
1989 high school photo. Jesus
yeah.
Christ.
So it says here that she was an immigrant with chic parents. So
all right.
yeah. So
Close
there you
enough.
go.
There you have it.
There you have it.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, just kind of hoping for a quip there.
Yeah. No, Moses just he got
I am
lost.
reading.
He got lost in her
right, yeah.
congressional portrait.
Yeah, I'm taking this
He's
off the screen.
getting very distracted.
Yeah.
What's going on under the bar there?
But one of the other points that you guys were making, you Moses in particular, was on social media. And social media, we've touched on this a little bit when we did that one episode. But Moses, you weren't here.
Oh no, social media, and I watch a lot of videos, and they're like they're all the algorithm I get. And
While your legs fall asleep on the shitter.
no, sometimes I'm just laying in bed. It's like right after you finish like a little Pornhub vid, and you're like, oh, now what do I do? And you
perfect.
just start watching nonsense.
Really painting a picture for us.
Oh, I guess we don't do the mic tests.
Yeah.
Those don't air.
He draws the crispy blinds closed.
They're crackly.
Crackly. Yeah, it's-
But on a lot of these videos, they're talking about somebody either committing suicide. They'll never say suicide. They say unalived.
Well, yeah,
or
you
they
can-
just bleep the goddamn word out.
Yeah.
And in that instance, I'm like, oh, what curse word did they use? Did they say fuck, shit, something?
Well, that's the thing.
And
You
it's
can't
just like,
say death, suicide, kill.
and it doesn't make any sense to me
Gun,
because what the
knife.
fuck are you talking about? Because I'm imagining these other words where it's like, like where does fuck fit into this the rest of this sentence? It doesn't, and I'm like, no, what are you talking about?
and that's when I thought about fucking myself because I was so depressed.
Oh, well, that's
There
usually
was
what
nothing
happens.
else
I'm
to
like,
live
you know
for.
what? I'm just
So
gonna
I
jerk off
thought
again.
about
Like-
fucking myself.
I know for a fact that on Twitter, if you say like death, dying, anything like that, and you're trying to monetize your video,
Oh,
it will
yeah.
get demonetized.
Yeah, absolutely.
You'll get a strike for
Yep.
that, which is weird because we use that word so carelessly now these days. Like
Yeah.
we'll just say like, oh, like if you're a comedian, like, oh, I died out there,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Or if you get like,
Or I bombed.
yeah, you bombed.
It's like, I don't think he's taking out too many people with that joke.
But at the same time, too, like you could say, like, oh man, like if you're at a comedy show and you were laughing at whatever joke, you're like, oh, I'm dying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
at that point, we're using this word indiscriminately, but you're still censoring it
Yeah.
on something that
I was
on the one platform that I'm being told is the one that has free speech on
Right.
it.
Right.
I was listening to I was watching a YouTube video the other day. It was on something like whatever, politics from overseas, this, that, or the other.
Yeah.
But the guy who was narrating it, and it was subtitled because he had a pretty thick accent, but he's speaking in English. He was from either Ukraine or Russia. It was commentary on the war. And he's just speaking about what's happening over there. And almost like in every sentence, there was a bleeped word. Now, I had the subtitles, but it was that the word that he was using, it included like a syllable that sounded like gun or knife or sex. He was saying a completely unrelated. So it was picking out the individual syllable, and I got so distracted by it because I was like, "Is this man?" I was like half watching kind of thing, like doing other work, and then I get over there and I'm like, "This was supposed to be like a political thing," and I guess the guy's just cursing up a storm, and talking about some unsavory sexual violence, and I get over there and it was just editing out, it was bleeping automatically all of these like parts of words just as they sounded like it. So it begs the question of like, where does that end?
Where is the line drawn on just omitting or editing what people are saying? Because now I don't know what the hell he's talking about at all, because they're either bleeping out the words or using just dumb terminology to say the same fucking thing. Like, what is the difference between unalived and killed? Nothing other than one of them is fucking stupid.
And that we have to, I think that to talk about that particular subject, when you're talking about what third parties, like private enterprises do, like in this case, it's YouTube with what I'm talking about. We talked about Harvard and so on and so forth. That goes back to liability, which is that they don't want to allow you, like YouTube, I'll use that as an example. YouTube is not going to allow you to even potentially say the word gun. If, God forbid, some fucking parent gets their kid shot and then they sue you for it, and presumably you have to pay out a bunch of money. It's easier for them to get rid of the whole concept of free speech, and then you just don't have that, but they're not subject to lawsuits anymore, which is the government going along with the concept of that there's no free speech. So it still goes back to the government.
Yeah, they should be protected under the fact that, like, it's just a venue. If you don't want your kids watching it, parent your kids.
And that takes me to when we put out that episode about social media, we did get a nice little comment on Twitter. Again, supposed to be the platform for free speech. It was like,
it's called X.
Whatever.
Or are you talking about Meta?
It said something to the degree of corporations don't have to give you free speech. And in that regard, all right, moron, you've now given the government a corporate loophole to censor you.
Exactly.
And don't think that it's not happening right the fuck now or happened 3 years ago. The easiest thing in the world for them to do is, hey, we need you, Facebook. We need you, YouTube. We need you, Twitter, to start cracking down on these kind of ideas.
Corporations are people too, Dan, and they need to be protected.
No government.
Sound like a Republican.
No sensible government, right or wrong, no sensible government wants you to have free speech. That's the bottom line about it.
Yeah.
They feel bound by the law until they figure out a way to get around it in a real way, to completely get rid of that aspect of the law. But until they figure out the means to do that, they have to find these other ways around it, and corporations are 100% a part of that game that they play. And you as the individual have no recourse because you as the individual never have any recourse against corporate America or the government that's arguably above them.
It's not even corporate America. It's just corporations in general. They're huge multi-billion-dollar conglomerates.
Exactly.
They do this all over the place, and they want to make good with all of the governments because that's more money and it's less hassle for them.
Yeah, they do the same thing any country they go to. It could be Iran, China, Russia, fucking England, or this country right here. The difference is the same. We talk about having free speech, but in reality, it's the amount of speech that your government allows you to have. So I would say that we're really no different than those other countries.
But we're in America, and that's what really grinds my gears. You, America. Fuck you.
Another Family Guy reference, courtesy of Loud and Drunk.
Yeah, that is a copyright infringement.
I'm free to speak it. Free to speech it. Make that a sticker. I'm going to slap that on a T-shirt and go fuck yourselves.
All right. That's going to be a part of our first product line.
You're giving away too much.
Loudandrunk.com/merch.
Yeah. That's going to have to be edited. That thing is not ready.
But if you give governments that corporate loophole, then you have effectively neutered the First Amendment. And because what you were talking about, all these countries do that. That's the whole point of the First Amendment, is that the government, this government, not the other governments. The other governments don't have a First Amendment, so they can get around it all they fucking want because they don't have to deal with it. First Amendment here is supposed to be the sacrosanct, amendment. And they get around it by using this corporate loophole.
I'll give you the counter argument to it then, because you're right that is true. It's very much so enshrined in what it is in our laws, and it's enshrined in the concept of our governance, and it's a thing that Americans are very aware of. Other countries do have their own versions of that. They're typically not as stringent as ours. They're not as clear-cut cut as ours. But it goes to show you that the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, these things were written by lawyers. And the people who've been dissecting it ever since then, it's the same in every goddamn country in the world, that you always have a class of people that write your laws that are equipped to do that. And likewise, those people are equipped to find out a way around that. There's a loophole to anything that you say or that you write. You can say anything to me, and if I'm smart enough, then I can figure out the loophole in that.
Interpret as needed.
Exactly. The language itself is fallible. So the concept behind it is what you're really arguing. So in other words, our concept of what is free speech gets back to that original argument that we were having about what constitutes that. What does it mean to be free speech? What is that? So on and so forth. So it's still entirely up to the interpretation of ultimately lawyers, the same types of people who sit in the Congress, who are senators and representatives, the president, on and on and on. These people get to decide what that is, and they will decide it as it's best for them, working within the framework that they have. But there's always a way out of that framework, and you see it happen with every one of the laws that's written. There's obviously a myriad of these things, and if you want them to work your way, all that you need is a few allies who are also lawyers, and you can make it happen.
You really think our president's got any real say in any of what's going on? You seen that guy?
He's pretty old.
Really going for the low-hanging fruit.
Old hanging fruit.
Well,
Withered on the vine.
they droop down as you age.
You.
There it is.
You.
I don't get tired of that.
That's literally just becoming a period for Moses' statement.
It really is, yeah. You've got my sentiment about it would just be that you have to define what constitutes free speech for yourself. I do think that that we have it enshrined to whatever degree that we have it in our Constitution, our Book of Laws, so on and so forth. I think that that's valuable and has merit, but ultimately anybody can call it whatever they want. The words themselves are fallible, and that's what it comes down to.
The words may be fallible, but the ability to speak freely is the ability to think freely.
I agree. 100%.
And so if you take that away, then I use this term a lot when I go to you guys, and maybe I have a wacky idea. Yeah. Maybe I want to quit my job. Maybe I want to do this. Maybe I want to, move to Florida. I don't know.
Kill the Prime Minister of Malaysia.
Yeah, something like that.
That's in the cards, actually.
Yeah. First you get the sugar, then you get the power, then you get the women.
All right, we'll talk later.
That Hansel is so hot right now.
So in these sanity tests, I'm not just talking to you guys. I'm thinking out loud.
Yeah.
Right.
Because as I look at you, as I gauge your reactions to what I'm saying, and I'm also listening to myself at the same time, oh shit, I did not really think this through.
Right.
Or I'm like, you know what? They're not stopping me. Mm-hmm. And it actually makes some sense what I'm saying.
Well, all that I'm hearing out of this, Dan, is that you've got some dangerous thoughts.
Well, yeah, quit my job.
Maybe somebody should do something about that.
We need Michelle Pfeiffer for this dangerous mind.
You're gonna need. I think Coolio's dead.
Is Coolio dead?
Yeah, you're gonna need to grow your hair
Well,
back.
now I got to look that up.
Yeah, that
He's dead.
happened.
Is
yeah,
he?
he's dead.
He's
Yeah,
Oh,
he's dead.
You don't
man,
need to look it up. It's three people telling you.
Yeah, but that might just be your,
And now for our
abusive.
special guest, Coolio.
I knew it.
Dun, 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 dun.
He's walking through the valley of death. Probably thinking to
Nobody
himself.
gets that reference.
No, it's
Nobody gets that.
the same
Nobody?
reference.
No,
It's the same reference I made.
It's the only song people know by him, practically.
nobody knows.
Well, you
that
don't know
song
Slide, Slide, Slippity Slide? I forget what the name of the song is. But
anymore. Was that 1, 2, 3, 4? Fantastic Voyage.
I think it was Fantastic Voyage, yeah.
All right. There's your
job,
free
guys.
speech at work. Yeah.
Good job. Done figured it out.
Yeah.
Freedom,
Crack
His name
that
was
code.
Artist.
freedom to correct Moses about Julio being dead.
Just wait until he's the president. That freedom's long gone.
Are you kidding me? It'll just be anarchy.
Yeah, you get all the freedoms, and you're going to have to live with them.
Yeah.
Because nobody's coming to save you when you're
I don't
doing what you want
understand
to
it,
do.
Mr. Speaker. He's been sleeping for 6 days. It shouldn't be possible.
Are we talking about then, or...
I know we're making jokes here right now.
We
that
needed a little bit of levity, but
Yeah.
bring us back down, Dan.
But it actually made me think of something in terms of freedom of speech.
Sure.
Because a lot of people like to go out there and say that they're a free speech absolutist. And that sounds great. But you need like an optimal amount of freedom in terms of that, because as we've talked about, if you go up and I threaten you, I'm like, I'm going to kill you, like, oh shit. Dan's going to kill me.
Yeah.
Like, what am I going to do? Like, I got to, get a gun or a knife or a stick or something like that. Or maybe I just hold my
Got
arm
to
out.
exercise the Second Amendment.
that's still a thing?
Yeah.
yes.
It's there for a reason. It's a
To
pillar.
defend against Dan.
right.
Yeah.
When he goes on one of these free speech marches. Because I won't be having that in my town. Not in my town.
Yeah, that sounds like what? You live in the town from Footloose? You can't speak or dance?
No, I allow a little bit of dancing, but only on
No,
Tuesdays.
dancing is forbidden. Dancing has always been forbidden.
Noon to 2 p.m. and that's it. Get it out of your system.
Too much.
Yeah.
All these rules.
Yeah. It's for your own good, Justin.
They
I'm just
keep
trying to keep
telling
you
me
safe
that.
from yourself.
Everybody cut.
Well, thank you, Kevin Bacon, for freeing us all.
With what you're saying, then, like the absolutist thought, it's like there's part in like in an ideal situation that you would maybe want to think that way, but like that's not what we have.
Yeah.
You know, things are always more complicated than our simple brains will allow us to.
It's not practical. And
Yeah.
again, I'll bring it back to that. It's the fundamental aspect of law. You make a law and it says this is not allowed, and the things that aren't outlined here is not allowed, they are allowed, right? And that doesn't work. There's a myriad of gray areas. You need someone, a rational person, that the party agree with is rational to then discern, is this okay or is it not? And and bringing it back to what we were discussing before, when your society is small enough, that can be relatively easy. If it's the four of us and there's a disagreement amongst the two of us, there's two other people that we trust who are friends, etc., who can say like, look, Pete, you were an asshole. Justin, you were an asshole. Fucking John, you were whatever. And that can then be the means by which that discussion is then broken. When you've got
I have
300
Gilbert
million
Gottfried for
people. Oh, God. Wasn't he played like a duck or something? A goose.
He was a good. Well, yeah. Well, no, Gilbert Gottfried does that for me. He
was also Iago. Yeah.
I'm getting a lot of use out of this button in this episode.
That button's gonna get worn out real quick.
That was worth the $50,000 we spent on it. But yeah, you need that, because otherwise what you've got is a disagreement between two people where, again, one person could and I'll bring it back to that extreme, where it's one person says all of the Jews should be dead, and then there's a Jew who's like, I'm deeply offended and I feel threatened. That's valid. Both of those things, like you should, if that's how you feel, you should be, if you got hate in your heart, let it out, So the one person should be allowed to say that. And on the same hand, I understand how the person who's clearly targeted by that might feel very uncomfortable and want for that to stop.
It's like reverse Care Bears.
Wow, that's a deep dive right there. I want to jump into that one.
Let all the hate out of your heart.
Do you want to jump into that?
Nah, probably not. No. I grew up watching Care Bears on account of having a younger sister, so I'm going to bring
sure
this
that's
up with
why.
her. Yeah. Oh, believe me.
She wasn't born for 4 years before that.
Yeah, I got there eventually. But you need some sort of a party to discern that in some way, to basically determine. Ultimately, it's a judge. It's who's right and who's wrong. The problem is that you don't have that neutral party anymore. And again, it goes back to, in my opinion anyway, it goes back to that you have no relationship to the entities that are doing the judging.
Let's have a thought experiment on it. Like, I don't foresee it getting better.
Oh, no.
No, it's going to get worse. It's only going to get worse.
It's not going to get better because there's actually more of a call for it to get worse.
Yeah.
Because
that's kind of like my perception of it.
Because bringing it back to the college aspect, so many kids get offended by shit these days that they're the ones that are like, govern me harder, daddy. So they're going to insist.
That's a weird way to word it, but I'm weighing
I'm going
to quote you on that one.
That's fine. It's not even my original thought by Dan.
I love that. Totally
They
quoting
just
that.
want it. They just want to be told what to do.
Yeah.
And when you demand that sort of authoritarianism, then of course you're not going to be able to speak freely, and then it's going to hit everybody else.
That goes back to the overall concept, and I think that for me, anyways, this is like a basis of like how you want your government to function. It's safety versus it's safety versus freedom. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You're always making a trade-off between the two, which is why there is no right answer. So you're always making that trade-off. If there's people that you can trust, then you don't need to think about that too hard. But when you can't trust them, as is the case today, and presumably it'll be more of that case tomorrow and the next day, then that question becomes more and more real. Well, because you are going to trade one for the other.
That takes me to, I think it's a Ben Franklin quote, a country or a group of people, whatever, that trades freedom in for safety
Deserves
neither and will get neither.
Right.
Yeah, and we'll get, yeah, exactly, yeah.
And because that's true. So if you trade in your freedoms, it's not impossible, but it's very hard to get them back.
Right,
So
exactly.
your ability to
Yeah.
speak freely, if you trade that in because you're afraid that you might get offended by, a fart joke or something, you're not going to get that back very easily, because once you cede ground to the government, and government will always work for its own benefit,
Of course.
it's not going to give it back freely.
And likewise, it's the inevitability, again, personal opinion on this one, but it's the inevitability of it, because it's very easy to say freedom is the most important thing to me. It's more important than my personal safety, maybe more important than the safety of my family, and so on and so forth. And you only have that mentality if you didn't have freedom at some point. And I mean freedom that meant freedom to you. So we all grew up, as far as I'm concerned, with a certain level of freedom, certainly more freedom than many people in the world have, the majority, I would say. Also, we grew up with an illusion of freedom.
Yeah.
We were brought up in this idea, and it still exists today, where it's like the Chinese have no freedom, but we have all of the freedom. We just have a monopoly on that shit. Whereas I look at it and I go, we've got some freedom. The Chinese have some freedom, probably less than us, but I mean, like when you look at first world countries, which I'll classify the Chinas and Russias and so on and so forth into that, Western Europe, maybe a handful of others, well, you have some degree of freedom. And if you want to call that as much freedom as you need or want or whatever, then that's fine, whatever helps you sleep at night. But the bottom line is that it's entirely arbitrary in that regard. And then getting back to that ultimate question is that once you have that, or you think that you have that, then you begin to look towards just security. Because security is just the concept of maintenance of what I already have. I don't want anybody to fuck with my shit, because I already have it. I've got all the freedom, I got all the money, I got all the fucking things, even though we're really just getting peanuts, but that's fine. If it makes you feel good, then that's cool. But that's the trade-off that exists until that gets eroded, and then all of a sudden you find yourself in some sort of a revolutionary scenario, and you're like, fuck, I never actually had any freedom in the first place, and now I need a gun.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. 'Cause I feel like it's become like such like a slippery slope type condition that it's just like sliding away.
Yeah.
And
it's a natural evolution.
And like I get hem and haw about it, but it's like I don't know what to do about that. As
There's
an
nothing- if
individual.
If there is anything you can do.
There's nothing to do.
Yeah, well, what are you going to do? You're going to elect a Democrat who's not going to protect your freedom of speech, and you're going to elect a Republican who's also not going to protect your freedom of speech.
We got to launch an intifada and kill all the Jews.
all right.
Dan, did I just get it edited?
Yes.
All right. Oh,
Wait, it's not even the
oh shit.
it's not even the first 2 minutes, is it? Did we just start recording?
No, you just haven't been participating.
Well, that's my freedom too.
Freedom not
Freedom
to speak.
to silence. He does have the right to remain silent.
Oh,
yeah.
Well,
First
I've
time you've
never
heard that.
exercised that because I'm not big on
Not
exercising.
effectively.
I'm not a big fan of exercise. There it is.
And now that you've made everyone uncomfortable, we can scratch that off the list of things that
you're
make
welcome.
us uncomfortable. So, in terms of talking about things that make us uncomfortable, because free speech makes a lot of people on college campuses, and just in general, because your ability to speak freely might offend someone, because in order to speak freely and think freely, you have to risk being offensive.
Yeah.
What makes you guys uncomfortable?
Social interactions.
Second that.
I was going to say figure skaters. I just don't like the way they spin.
That's
You
fair.
don't like the way figure skaters spin.
No, it's just unnaturally fast, and it's just uncomfortable.
That's ice skaters, right?
Yeah, figure skater is an ice skater. Yes.
Sorry, I don't know.
All right, I didn't realize that
I'm
was
part
the part of
black.
it.
Sorry.
Well, no, there was the one that I always bring up.
What?
I forgot what his name is, but he
I don't know
plays
what you're
hockey.
talking about.
Oh,
The one. Yeah, the one fucking. There's like 3 black people
Was
in the
there 3?
history of
Oh,
hockey.
that's neat.
Yeah.
I stopped
Dan
watching.
can
There's
correct
more
me on
people than that in the history of hockey.
Yeah, go on, Dan.
Are there, Dan?
Are there?
I know there's the girl.
Yeah, you always mention, not on the podcast,
No,
but you
no.
always mentioned that there was like a girl. Like,
She's my favorite player on Tampa Bay
and
Lightning,
that
I
was
believe.
like 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, well, that
But
was
he's
the last
still
time I
got the
watched.
posters on the wall.
I do. It was her and Kathy Ireland.
Well, that's a weird combination.
It's weird.
You're really dating yourself.
I didn't like. That's another thing that makes me uncomfortable. Cindy Crawford's mole.
You really are dating yourself.
I liked it on Marilyn Monroe, but on Cindy it didn't work
Jesus,
for
how
me.
old are you?
You know, that's all I got. You know.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So like, a lot of shit makes me uncomfortable. I just like play it like I'm dead inside, but everything
Yeah.
makes me insane.
Yeah.
Social interactions, like if I don't know you, like you're the enemy to me. It's
Yeah.
like I don't want to deal with you.
I kind of feel that way. It's funny. It's like I was at the bank the other day on the note of things that make us uncomfortable, and I'm just piggybacking on what you
Oh,
said,
yeah,
'cause
absolutely.
I feel exactly the same way. Social interactions
Yeah.
are probably the most uncomfortable that I get. That's why I drink so much. And
I was literally about to say that.
yeah. And I was at the bank the other day, and they were like, I just chit chat with them because I'm there often enough. And the guy's like, he's like, oh, like, what are you doing? Like, you got a shop somewheres? And I was like, yep, I do, but fortunately, I don't have to hang out there. And he's like, oh, you don't like hanging out? And I was like, no. I was like, a lot of people go into that store, and I kind of like panic when they try to talk to me internally. And but at the same time, like, I feel really pressed, like, presumably by myself and my upbringing, but also by society a little bit, like that I need to be on. Like, I just need to be like, I need to make this look good. I can't let anyone know that I'm secretly an insane person.
Right.
You know? So I just like put on this face. So I told him, I was like, yeah, no, I'm incredibly uncomfortable when there's like a lot of people there. I just don't know what to say. And I'm increasingly panicking in my head.
Yeah.
And he said to me, he's like, my God, you seem so social. I never would have thought that about you. I'm like, I'm doing it when I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm doing the same thing because you talk to me. And he's a nice guy. And I do like talking to him, but it's like in my head, I'm just like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to say next. So it's just like an internal kind of scenario like that.
I have that all the time. So it's like there are people that have the gift of gab and there are people that do not. I largely am perfectly fine to sit in silence and not talk to anybody.
Yeah.
Same way with me. Yeah.
But I also wear my crazy on my sleeve, so
You
I'm
do.
willing to. I don't get uncomfortable very often, if at all.
It's like I know how. No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
But like I know how to play nice. I know how to make it look like I want to talk to you.
Yeah.
But like I really don't. I very much don't.
I'm just going through the motions. I'm doing what I think that you want me to do.
On this note, guys,
Yeah.
can I tell you a little story about how I recently got very uncomfortable?
I would love to hear it.
So, for the first time in a while, I had to go back into Manhattan for work.
Oh wow.
I take the bus normally because that's a little bit of a long haul. My car, she's an old lady, so I don't like putting
Gotta
the stress
treat her
on
nice
Gotta
and-
treat her
yeah.
nice. I want to get another, 100,000 miles and not have to get a car for another 30 years.
Yeah.
Will the pedometer go that high?
300,000?
Yeah.
Pedometer.
Well, only 300. I don't know what it's called.
What you think it's 3 million?
pedometer.
Oh, yeah, I thought you were getting close to $1 million with that car. I've never known you with a different car.
Yeah, because I want to take care of her.
He treats her right, Moses.
So I go to the bus station. Immediately, there are like two cops on my tail. I'm like, shit, was I speeding? Like,
Right.
What's going to happen here? Another thing that makes me uncomfortable, being tailed by the cops.
Amen.
Well, that's fair. Yeah, that one does get me.
Because you have to do a roundabout to get to your parking spot in this
correct,
bus
yeah.
station. So as I go through the roundabout, they stop. So I'm like, all right, they're not after me, at least. I park. I go and get the ticket, pay for parking, all that stuff. And I'm just standing there waiting for the bus. And I'm looking over at this one bus that was there when I got there. And the cops are clearly just talking to this one very hefty, large, very fat.
Hefty.
Yeah. Very fat black man. And, the cops are sticking around. They make him get off the bus. He's talking with a taxi driver that's there. I don't know what his plan was, but I also really care. It's none of my fucking business.
Yeah.
So as I'm standing there, the 9:30 bus becomes the 10 o'clock bus because I guess the 9:30 bus doesn't fucking exist. Another thing that makes me uncomfortable, when the bus schedule is fucking wrong.
I think you're getting uncomfortable and angry mixed up.
No, I mean, that's
They
both.
often go hand in hand.
So that's how I deal with my uncomfortableness. I just get angry.
What happens to me?
Yeah. It's one way.
So get on the bus, sitting down, and this same guy gets on the bus, and he is just yelling. He's yelling about Martin Luther King Jr., he's yelling about Rosa Parks. He's yelling about George Floyd for some reason.
All the
Those
hits.
people. All the greatest hits.
Yeah.
And
No Malcolm X in there?
he called the bus driver an Uncle Tom.
Oh, nice.
Which I was I felt bad for the bus driver. at that
Yeah,
point.
that's shitty to hear. Yeah.
And then guess who he sat down next to? Guess
The blackest man on the bus.
So he plops down, and I'm like, oh, God, this man is taking up half of my seat.
Yeah, those seats aren't very big.
Yeah. Another thing that makes you uncomfortable, sharing a seat with a fat man.
Yeah, that happens on planes,
Airplane-
too.
Planes,
Yeah.
quite often. Cops come onto the bus. They prime off a second bus. Now, this cop is it's not even I'm going to arrest you. He's just like,
Oh, yeah.
wagging his
Wagging his
finger,
finger.
just laying into him. And then the guy gets back onto the bus, and I'm like, all right, I guess I'm gonna have him as a seat buddy for this whole 90-minute at least trip.
Seats taken.
Yeah.
If only.
And also, by the way, this guy will not stop coughing.
Oh,
Like, he was just coughing the whole way. And it was great. So,
You were like in a Larry David skit. weren't you?
yes, I'm describing right now a Curb Your Enthusiasm
I
skit.
feel like I've seen this before, but go on.
So he's sitting there, and also now he's not sitting still for the first portion of this bus ride. He's like moving around, like he
Gotta
literally
get that
gets
ass
up.
groove nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's moving like his ass is right up against me at one point. And I'm
It's like twerking on you?
He's making that ass clap.
Oh, Moses. Nobody needed that.
no one did.
We're talking about being uncomfortable now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. I felt a shiver down my spine.
This is how I deal with it.
Yeah.
I make everyone else uncomfortable when I am.
At one point, because he can't stop coughing, he coughs. And he taps me. By the way, does not talk. He is signaling me. He's just like, I'm making a motion right now
Oh, yeah,
of
he's-
just like a wrapping it up motion.
Yeah. It's like Navy SEAL signals. They're like about to like clear a room.
That was the whole thing. And I was just like, dude, I don't know what you're doing. And then at one point, he refused to talk to me. He didn't say a word to me until a certain point. We'll get to that later.
I'm picturing you wearing like 7 pairs of sunglasses at this point. You're just pulling more out.
So he showed me his hoodie because he had mucus all over.
God.
And you didn't notice that before?
He was like, I got to talk into the mic.
Undulating.
He was like past that. Like, first of all, he kept falling asleep too. So like every time we hit a turn, it would just go right into me.
That sleep apnea gets you.
So I'm like, oh, okay. You need something to clean that off. So I go into my bag. I had literally had just stopped on the way to the bus stop to get tissues. So I just grab a handful. I'm like, there you go, man. After that, he goes over to me again, taps me and starts signaling. And I'm like, dude, I don't know what you're doing. So I'm like, you know what? I don't know why he's not talking to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm like, just write it. Like, I'll pull up Notepad on my phone. I'm like, write down what you want to say to me.
This is such a crazy scenario.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was thinking speed.
Keep this bus over 50 miles an hour or else we're all going to die.
Yeah, like
or
the bomb
unalive
The bomb is
ourselves.
hooked up to his trachea or something like that.
He writes Google, just Google.
Oh, my God.
On the Notepad. So I
Oh, it all
pull,
makes sense now.
I pull up the browser on my phone and I hand it to him, and he typed in Ameritrade.
What the fuck?
Okay.
Yes.
So he wanted to trade some stocks with you, like Pokemon.
And I was like, do you want me to sign up for Ameritrade? Is that what
Isn't
this
that
is
like
about?
a pyramid scheme?
I
I think it's just a
I know it largely by name
an
only.
app
I don't.
that you
think
just
it's-
like buy and sell stocks on or something like
yeah,
that.
it's something to that effect. 'Cause
Is
I
it
think
It's like a Robin Hood of sorts.
I think it's owned by Charles Schwab. I looked at this. He actually, like, on my phone was, you know how they have the drop downs on Google?
Yes.
He was just hitting those and showing it to me. And I'm like, okay, man, yeah, I know I need to take care of my stocks a little bit better.
How do you
Gotta
know
diversify
that?
your bonds, nigga.
How did he know that you had to do that?
And then at one
He's
point,
good at reading people.
and then after that, instead of using my phone again to communicate, he just starts writing the letter,
Oh, writing in the air?
letters in a sky. And eventually I figured out, oh, he wants a piece of paper. I couldn't tell initially because his P's started turning into D's.
These nuts.
Wow.
I'm like, dude, I don't have any paper on me. I don't know what you want me to do. And then he does this. He holds up his finger. He goes into his pocket and grabs one of the tissues. I don't know if he used it to clean, any of the...
Best not to dive down that rabbit hole.
And so he wrote, and you guys saw this in
Yes.
pre-production.
That was a tissue? Jesus, that's pretty impressive that he was able to write all
is.
of that on there
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
not tear it.
That's a
Yeah.
steady hand.
Yeah.
He wrote a manifesto
Yeah.
about how you shouldn't tell people how much you make and money is power and like how much and then he went on to tell me how much he made.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I got this amount of money and like, oh, you call this number for this person.
His
I'm like,
cousin is Jennifer Williams.
yeah, apparently. Apparently, Jennifer
And
Williams.
honestly, it's like I'm hearing this, and I just want to know more about this man. So, like, where do you think he is? Did we get his number?
We have
a number.
a number on that napkin or
Moses.
tissue.
That sounds like a Moses job.
I'm gonna have to call. I call people all the time. Whatever.
Yeah. All right.
Maybe we'll hook up your phone to the Roadcaster sometime. We'll see what happens.
And it doesn't even end there.
Oh, God.
We're getting towards the Lincoln Tunnel. And then finally,
Where dreams are made.
he starts talking to me, whispering. Because I guess he feels like he's
can
made
trust
it.
you now.
Yeah, he can trust me.
The cats are brown now. The cats are brown, Dan.
And then I don't remember exactly what he said to me, but I remember two highlights. He called himself a mastermind.
Okay.
And then he also said some white lady can sign away his freedoms.
Yeah. Any
That's
particular
probably
one?
the
don't know.
judge.
I don't know how many of them there are around here, though, but okay.
You know you're getting subpoenaed for that.
Honestly, we're all probably getting subpoenaed just for like being in the same room as that man.
I don't even know the man's name, so I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
The last piece of that I can tell you is that at the end of the bus ride, this man just stuck out his hand like this to give me a fist bump. And I'm like, okay, I'll just give you a fist bump.
Right.
Meanwhile, the entire time, this entire 90-minute bus ride, I just wanted to watch a goddamn football game on my phone. And it's like, and he can see it. He can see, like, I have the phone, like, eye level, because I'm trying to be like, all right, don't turn your head downward and hurt your neck, because you've done that for 38 years. And that was the conclusion of our tale, guys.
That is wild.
Yeah.
Absolutely wild.
He got off the bus and was in Port Authority. It was just like standing there. Gave me a nod. I gave him a nod back and just scurried away.
I'll say this. While I do respect your struggle, and obviously this man, on the note of being uncomfortable, he lent a little bit of that to you, and he stole you that football game and what have you. But this is a man who does believe in freedom of speech, because nothing was going to take that away from him. His freedom of speech exists everywhere.
He took his own freedom of speech away.
Yeah, because he's so comfortable with it that he doesn't need to exercise it every moment of every
There was
day.
something on that napkin about like weapons. There was something on that, right, Moses? You saw that part, right?
It was something
It's
about
got it right now.
how
You
he
read
made
weapons.
how he made $683,000 out of an $800,000 amount that he already had. Was the 600?
Sounds like he lost money.
Well, no, that was the profit out of. He made that not abundantly clear.
From
just-
talking to Dan on the train? Or
No,
bus?
this
Or-
is
from all
from
that.
guns, drugs.
Oh, but it was all
and
legal.
Parties and broke.
Parties.
Oh, yes.
yes,
Parties in broke towns.
Yeah.
I mean, that's nice.
A market I never thought of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and
broke towns have a lot of drug money, so I mean, there's that.
yeah, I'm sure there's probably money to be made there.
Yeah.
Because they're all just looking for a good time, so why not throw a party and charge people?
We might be missing the boat on this.
Yeah.
Moses, you got the right look to just like talk to strangers on trains.
Yeah, I just don't like talking to people at all.
But listen, hear me out. If we play this game long enough, eventually the person that you sit down to will coincidentally be Dan.
Then I'll be uncomfortable all over again.
There's one thing that I've learned in my life is that it's never a coincidence me sitting next to Dan.
What I will say to kind of like wrap up my story, because people were like, oh, how you doing? When I finally got to work, how you doing? I'm like, I've had the weirdest goddamn morning. Like, I don't know if this guy was trying to give me sound financial advice or sell me drugs.
Yeah.
Like, it could
Can it
really
be both?
It could be both, but I don't know which one, because it didn't seem like it was gonna be both.
Yeah.
You
sent
should have went
us-
with the drugs.
Yeah. You sent us a picture of this manifesto tissue, and I gave you all props for being able to read it.
Yeah, I
I
struggled
was looking
to read
at it, I'm
it,
like,
yeah.
I don't even know what's going on. So I'm reading like select words
Yeah.
here and there, and I'm like,
It took a minute to break that because it was very hard to read on a phone. When I had it in hand, it made it became very much more clear, like the words, not the understanding of them put
you
together
did
that way.
say
But
multiple times, oh, I see now. Oh, I get it now. And I'm like, uh-oh.
But also, it was still incredibly hard to read.
it was, yeah.
Because I was trying to read it on the bus.
Well,
First
he was writing on a tissue. Like it's
I mean,
hard.
yes, I agree that it's hard to write on a tissue. But still, at the same time, I'm like, dude, I don't even know what the sentence structure is here.
There wasn't.
I'll give
There
you
really
props
wasn't.
for engaging with that. Yeah.
Well,
What choice did he have?
I really didn't have a choice. I was actually tempted to tell him to shut up when he first got on the bus, just because he was making a scene. But I'm like, dude, what have you learned in life? Don't engage crazy.
Don't engage crazy. You disconnect from that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you just got put right in the front row, though, baby. That was it. That was all for you.
Yeah.
All for you.
Sounds fun.
That would make me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But
Holy shit.
that still goes back to the same thing. People make
Yeah.
me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's never animals or trees or even buses themselves. I find them interesting. It's the people in the buses. It's the people in the forests.
That's an odd statement, but all right. Buses are interesting, aren't they?
They can be. They're more interesting than most people.
Yeah, come back next week so we could talk about buses.
Are we doing a bus episode?
The whole thing buses.
I'm way into that. Can we do trains instead?
I'm going to skip that bus episode.
Yeah.
You guys can handle that on your own.
All right.
Just
trains
show me
it
where
is.
the play button is or record.
No, it's the what an asshole button.
That's all you
Oh,
really
I know
need.
the orange
Whenever
one.
you want to say something, you just hit that button instead.
My goodness.
I know lots about buses.
You know
I'm
lots
sure-
about... Oh, my goodness gracious.
I don't even know what that means.
Yeah.
I'm into it, though.
I don't know why they're interesting. but all right.
Crazy begets crazy, so it's starting to slide.
Here we are. This is what happens when I don't have enough wine.
Well, one thing that you should have learned in this episode, no lesson that I've learned, do not engage crazy. But you should engage with us by subscribing to this podcast. Leave us a 5-star review. Check us out on YouTube and Rumble. Make sure that you like, comment, share, and hit that notification bell. Follow us on social media. We are at Loud and Drunk on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. If you enjoyed this podcast, then become a Loud and Drunk supporter at loudanddrunk.locals.com and patreon.com/loudandrunk. So, guys, we had a robust discussion of freedom of speech. Then I kind of just went off on a tangent about my bus ride because that made me very uncomfortable. Another thing that made me really uncomfortable in general, being in New York.
It's never a good time.
That's understandable.
Justin, what are your closing thoughts for this episode?
I think we had a really good conversation. We're not here to answer anything. We're not here to teach you anything. But thanks for listening, guys. We appreciate you.
Moses, closing thoughts.
I've learned something here, and it's that you do have the right to freedom of speech so long as you don't exercise the right to use it.
As long as you're not dumb enough to actually try it. These are your rights, Moses. You know your rights. I believe your name was George Lee.
My name is George Lee. Thank you. It's been a pleasure being here. And yes, to follow up on what Moses said, I think it's very important that everyone exercises what they see as free speech, but also, at the same time, be very careful to not offend people. There's no reason for that. You can always speak your mind, but at the same time, cater to every other human being's individual whim. And there's nothing that stops you from doing that. So just be mindful, that's all. Otherwise, obviously, there are very real legal consequences. Rightfully so.
And so, for Justin, Moses, and Mr. George Lee, I'm Dan. Thank you for joining us, and until next time, these are your rights, Moses.
Fuck you, America.
Know your rights. Loud and drunk.
Bye.